Hi, Dion from Evolution Support Services here with a chat about our growth as recovering human beings, or just human beings going about our life, our journey through life. And it comes on the back of a chat that I was having at the Taoist temple that I go to. I don't really talk about Taoism much on this channel. It's not a channel to talk about Taoism, although if you look at acupuncture, the points that we're tapping on, the history of where this ancient religion came from, this Eastern religion, and you'll probably stumble across Taoism in there. But to do EFT tapping doesn't mean that you're a Taoist. Same as doing Tai Chi Chuan doesn't mean that you're Taoist. You're just participating in a practice that would be used as part of that religion. When we look at our surroundings here, we can look at a natural surroundings, which is kind of like what Taoism follows, that natural order of things. When we can look at that, we can also look at a particular mindset, and I wouldn't say a Taoist mindset, but a mindset that where it doesn't become so rigid, it does flow a little bit, it does adapt, it does less stick to, well, this is the 8 steps of how to do something, or this is the very rigid way of becoming something in your life, the life hack ways of doing things sort of thing. There was no life hack for these trees to develop. They develop very slowly and naturally of themselves, and were nurtured by the environment around them. The temple that I go to follows a lot of rituals. There's a lot of ceremonies, there's memorial ceremonies that I've taken part in. This one was a prayer ceremony, and part of it is preparing all the offerings, folding the paper. There's a lot of volunteer work that also goes into just a service, not along with the actual ritual, which is something that they're eventually going to be teaching us how to do, is to take part in a ritual. But there's a lot to actually go into preparing for that, which does mean practicing and following and repeating a lot of things. The chat that I was having was with a lady that doesn't follow Taoism. She told me herself she just likes to help out there. And it was around disciplining children. She was asking me, should we discipline children? And it's quite ironic, given that not long ago I posted in the community section about what the Latin root, or the origin, the etymology of the word discipline, because we know it to be somewhat of a punishing word now. I need to have the discipline mindset. I need to be able to push myself, or there's a disciplinary action for when you've done something wrong. There's punishment involved in that. Where the root of the word started off, I think it was Disicipulis, if I say that correctly, which meant follower, it meant student, it meant pupil. So you're kind of a student if you were, I would say, a disciple of something, following a discipline. To be disciplined meant that you're a student, a pupil, a follower of something. And what you choose to follow in was what you'd be practicing or learning a part of. So if you're practicing to be a stonemason, a carpenter, you'll be a pupil in that, and you'll be following the practices to become a carpenter. You'll be following the practices to become a stonemason. You'll be to become a doctor. You'll become indoctrinated in the doctorate of becoming a doctor. But over time, these words change. They change their meaning. Sometimes they take on quite bitter tones. It can be in the changing environments of which they're said. Even if you look up the etymology of the word nice, you'll see that the word nice didn't have nice meanings back in the day. There was times where to be called nice was not nice. As things change, as things evolve, they tend to lose their meaning and take on new meanings. But the origin of it wasn't so much to punish the child for saying or doing the wrong things. It was the child would be the student, learning from its environment, learning how to develop. It would be following the teachings of its parents, and what it knows of itself is from its environment, and it would be getting its nurturing from the environment. Similar to these trees and this forest around me. To grow tall, it requires rain, it requires sunlight, and it requires all these things, stable ground for roots to develop within. And when we tend to forget where our roots come from, the tree can become a bit misshapen. It might also forget or say that it's more than its roots. And then we get into things where we need historians, where we look back in time and go, oh, so that's where we came from. Or family trees, it's like, oh, so that's where it went wrong. There's the bad apple. That's why my life is this way. we tend to look back in order to know who we are as people today. So sometimes it's good to know of where we came from, sometimes even to know where we're going to, because there can be patterns of behaviours, patterns, trends in societies, fashion trends, these sorts of things, where we just repeat and recycle a copy of a copy of a copy. It's just there's modifications in that copy, where the modification from becoming a student becomes we must punish the person if they get it wrong with discipline. So back to what I was saying with what the lady was saying with should we discipline our children? It's a hard question because I did answer it, but whether my answer is right or wrong is really down to how it actually plays out in the situation. If we take it in the how it's meant today, which would be more, should we punish our children if they do things wrong? It comes down to your environment of how you're brought up and also how you see punishment. People could see time out, starving the child of love and affection as a form of punishment. They don't want to hit the child, but if I just lock them in a room and not pay them any attention, put them in solitary confinement, then they'll get the message. They won't do it again. There's actually hitting of a child, so they know their place. There's verbally abusing, there's emotionally, there's many different ways to punish a child. Sometimes there's a point where there's never going to be a right or wrong answer, and what I mean by that is you can never get through life without any scars. Even the well-intending parent, the well-meaning parent, is not going to have a good day. And that good day can sometimes be taken out on the child. Even though probably the majority of their life, they've had a good upbringing, there's people that have had bad upbringings and see the child as the source of that cathartic release. They can also not be able to regulate their own emotions and need to display those emotions onto others. There can be times where it's like we didn't get the job promotion, for example, and we're really frustrated of that, and we're taking that frustration home, and then there's the kid that runs up and says something wrong that we interpret as wrong, and then it's like, well, you'll get the just be quiet sort of thing, and we take out our emotions on the child as a form of disciplinary action. We are not actually responding, we're reacting. We're reacting because we've got our emotions. And generally when we're going into therapy, it's like we want to be centered, we want to be grounded, we want to be receptive of information. So sometimes it's checking in with our emotions first. It's checking in with how we're feeling sometimes. And we're not going to get it perfect all the time. I don't want to sort of say it's like, well, we need to be all these, but I guess it's looking at what extremes that we're going to actually display our form of what we think is right for our environment to be conducive of ourselves rather than the people within our environment. So are we controlling our environment through physical or emotional aggression in order so we can feel a little bit safer within ourselves? Because the environment will tend to not feel too good as well. It'd be like me not being comfortable if there was ants crawling up my leg, so therefore I take a flamethrower to everything. It's a bit of an extreme reaction. But there's the other side of it where it's like, without any learnt what is right, what is wrong, what is morals, what is good or bad, what is appropriate behaviour, what is not appropriate behaviour in certain situations, there becomes almost an entitlement, a form of I deserve everything and everything should be given to me, which can actually be quite detrimental to the person, because then it becomes a person that sees this forest as their own source of supply. I shall tear this all down and put up a shopping mall sort of thing so I can benefit from money sort of thing, that sort of thing, where the environment becomes of use to them because there's no limits to their taking, because I've never learnt that. So it becomes a fine line of knowing of ourselves. Are we overreacting to things? Are we taking out our emotions? Are we centered or balanced? And tipping over that balance onto other people. And if it's particularly young ones, who are little disciples, little pupils, little students of life, learning from their environment. Are we actually regulating our own emotions? Are we checking in with ourselves? Are we taking that breath before we actually say something? Are we having that moment of composure? And we won't get it right all the time. It's like there's no perfect answer. There's no perfect situation for that perfect answer. How we actually develop our practices, how we actually develop ourselves, is going to be a reflection of our environment and how our environment interacts with us. And sometimes when we don't know much about ourselves because we've been in service of others, it's going to be a hard journey to actually know about that. It's going to be a rocky path as we develop who we are as a person, because who we are as a person may have been of service to other people, or who we are as a person has been taking too much of other people and needs to learn to limit and be able to have that capacity within oneself to take care of themselves. In many different ways, like this forest, every tree started off as a seed. There was a seed planted, and it was nurtured. And when you look at your development through life, one of the things that we're not looking at in our 8 steps or our 12 steps to this, or this is our life hack to this or that, is that simple nurturing. We tend to want to do things for ourselves because they make us feel better. We tend to want to get better so we can feel better. For life to develop, it needs nurturing, it needs care, it needs encouragement, it needs some form of resistance to actually grow. It needs positive resistance, it needs some form of challenge to actually develop oneself. It needs a balance. It needs to know when it's getting out of balance and how to regulate itself and bring itself back in. And all these things are a continued learning process. But without that nurturing, without any form of care to it, any form of love, then it remains a seed, a dormant seed. Our development, we don't want to be stunted in our growth in a way. We want to be able to care for ourselves, love for ourselves, and develop for ourselves so we can grow tall amongst the peers of our other trees, our other community of forest. So sometimes when we look at things, we have to look back at things and know, okay, so this might be where my issues lie, but is that where I choose to lie? That's just the awareness of where it is and how I choose to grow from that. You could look at it. If you've had a crappy upbringing, then it takes manure for roses to grow, sort of thing. But it also takes that choice of growing. And it also takes an awareness to know that the perfection in life actually lies within the imperfection. And the more that we try to perfect something, the more that we are the furthest away from actually achieving it. And what I mean by that is when we're in the action of perfecting, we're still in the trying and doing, and sometimes that's a fear thing. And sometimes to break that shell and grow is to actually know that along the way, the more that we practice, the more that we try at something, it's not practice makes perfect, it's practice makes second nature, where a piano player no longer has to focus on, is this the C key, is the craftsman no longer has to refer to the manual on how to build something. It becomes second nature, what Taoists would call Wu Wei. And in this state where it's second nature, it's our second behavior, it's that subconscious action. And when we clear the weeds, the stuff, that the punishment action, that pushing ourselves action, that we must be right, we must be perfect, or else, then life can flourish a little bit more easier. It's less constricted that way. And when we break free of that, and when we go to conduct our lives, where we go to do something that's might be perceived as hard to others but as easy to us, it's because we've put in a lot of effort. It's like those overnight success people. There's a lot of hard work that went into that overnight success, to the point where they do something effortlessly. A sports player that can pass the ball without even looking to his teammate. They just know by instinct. It's there. It's cultivated within. They've put in a lot of effort, a lot of repetition, similar to maybe one day when I'm doing a prayer ceremony, I'll know how to do all the chimes and what to say sort of thing. So it's all to a rhythm where I'm not living in the fear of doing something. I'm doing it because it's second nature. It's there. It's subconscious. It's the subconscious programming. I'm no longer having to consciously force or perfect something. I'm in the moment doing something. And that's kind of where we want to get, where we don't have to force things. We don't have to get to the point where we're doing those 8 steps all the time, because we're always climbing steps. We're always it's going to be an effort. We kind of want to get to the point where we've mastered a skill, but even in the mastering, we're still becoming masters within the mastering. So it's not going, well, I'm a master now and kicking back on the couch. It's going, well, I've perfected my skill, and now it's no longer an effort. And others might perceive me a master in that. It's not like, oh, I'm a master. So yeah, it's a way of looking at growing, developing, because these trees don't have to force or unnaturally be trees. They're just being trees. They're just doing what they're doing until they're no longer doing what they're doing, and then they become fertilizer for the next trees. So it becomes a cycle once again. So yeah, I think I'll end it there because it's getting a little bit long now. A way to look at it: repetition, sticking at something is good. Following, if we look at Disicipulis as being a student, you're going to be learning something. So there's going to be a learning process. If it's a healing process, it's learning a new way of being, a new way of what you need to do to actually get better. So it's following the steps into doing that to the point where you no longer have to. You're either healed, you're either doing what you're doing naturally, and you're there in a way. But yeah, it's keeping in mind that there is doing in the healing process to the point where there's non-doing, to where you're healed, or the behaviours that were unbecoming are now becoming healthier behaviours, where you don't have to think, well, am I this kind of a person, sort of thing, because you're a better type of a person. And we all just want better for ourselves and giving ourselves the love, time, and compassion to naturally grow. And we all come from the earth at the end of the day, so I don't think we're any different to these trees. So I'm Darren from Evolution Support Services, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.